What is kind of fascinating to me is when you look at individual schools, okay? And so when I look at individual schools, I start looking at surprises. Which teams surprised me in a good way and which teams surprised me in a bad way. I like doing it as a surprise because attaching winners and losers or grades, I think is really dumb. I hate doing it in the NFL draft because we don't know. Like, we haven't seen these kids. We haven't seen them develop. I can give you surprises like, oh man, I thought their class would have been much higher, or they did better than maybe I expected, or maybe they turned some sort of corner in terms of what they were struggling with or who they were struggling with. And I've got some of those examples right now. So you know me, I'm always pessimistic about things. So let me start with some of my surprises, like in maybe not the best way, right? So some of my bad surprises. Let's start with USC. USC, seeing them where they were in the recruiting rankings was jarring, to be honest with you. I look at USC and I thought, you know what, Lincoln Riley in this state should be able to have a top 5 recruiting class easy. I mean, Clay Helton was pulling in top classes. Now, not one of those last years, but you look back through the USC recruiting rankings, and it's like, it's littered with top 5 classes, even with when the program wasn't doing much. And so I thought to myself, like, surely Lincoln Riley, with the momentum that he's generating, is going to be able to just open up his back door and pull in a top 5 class. And it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. And more specific is the struggle that they had when it comes to the state of California. And when I look at what you need to do in USC is you got to put a fence around the state of California. Because if you can do that, you're going to pull in a great class. And this is worrisome for me. And I know that they did a nice job in the transfer portal, and more on that in a moment. But basically, there were about 20 players in California, in the top 300 in the country, right around there. 19, 20 players in the top 300, depending on who you use as a rating system. And USC got 3 of them. That's not enough. That's not enough. They should be doing much better with those players in their own backyard. And they need to do a lot better. They did get 3 of the top 10 in the state. And the top 10 are all 100, top 150 nationally. But again, like, you look at some of these other teams, Oregon comes in, gets 4 of the top 10 players. You look around the country and you've got teams coming into California like Tennessee, Miami, Texas, Florida State, Georgia, Louisville, Notre Dame. I mean, it's one thing if Oregon comes down. I kind of get it, right? It's the Pac-12. If UCLA grabs a few of them when Stanford was rolling, maybe Stanford grabs a couple of them. Heck, even if Colorado maybe grabs one of them, right? It's like it's in the footprint, it's in the family, right? It's the Pac-12. You kind of understand it. But when you're getting poached from outside of your footprint, that is bad news. And so I'm sitting here looking at Tennessee, Miami, Texas, Florida State, Georgia, Louisville, and Notre Dame, all coming in there and poaching talent out of the Pac-12 footprint and out of California. That is not good. And then it gets even a little bit worse when you look at what this team needs desperately and then what happened in recruiting in terms of the high school players in this signing period. USC did not do well signing some of those top high school players out of their own state that were defensive players. They need defensive help. We saw it right before our eyes late in the season. I mean, how many times are we going to see a Lincoln Riley coach team play exquisite offense and lose the game? 50 points, 500 yards, and yet oh, well, they still lost the game. They have to get better on defense. And then when you look at some of the best high school players in the state, Where did they go? Well, the top two, the best edge player, Oregon got him. Top two cornerbacks in the state, they're out. Miami got the next best defensive lineman in the state. Florida State got the best linebacker in the state. They didn't get any of the top defensive players that they needed. Those are the guys that, I mean, you got to live in those living rooms. That is your bread and butter. That is the lifeblood of the program. And so this is why I'm surprised at USC. Right? Do I think that they could be okay? Yeah, they might be okay, but that's not a good omen. It's really not. My next surprise on the kind of negative side, if you will, was Michigan. You know, Michigan landed at what? I think 18th is the last I saw, and 19th overall class, despite 2 straight playoff appearances, despite 2 straight Big Ten titles, despite 2 straight wins over their rival, the Ohio State Buckeyes. That should have translated into more momentum. And we've seen them have in their history under Harbaugh much better classes than this. So it's kind of strange. They were 3rd in the Big Ten, by the way. It's not even like they were just 2nd in the Big Ten. They were 3rd in the Big Ten. Penn State jumped up ahead of them. And then you look at the average player rating. And this is what was most alarming to me. I showed you already, Ohio State, one of 3 teams with a 93 or above, 93.6. Penn State was the 2nd in the Big Ten with an average rating of 91.1. And 3rd in the Big Ten with an average rating of 88.8 was Michigan. I mean, you're talking about almost 5 points on average below in terms of your average player rating. That one was a bit of a head scratcher to me, a bit of a head scratcher with both of those. The momentum that each of them should be having, what USC and the positive momentum that they got, the Heisman Trophy winner, Lincoln Riley. I mean, they're moving to the big, I don't understand it. And I didn't understand the Michigan one either. Now, to be fair, and I want to just say this, to be fair, what I led the show with was kind of a precursor to this moment, which was you don't know exactly how each coach or collective or program or athletic department is approaching the NIL conversation with incoming recruits. And that is impacting drastically where these recruits end up. Drastically impacts that. So you've seen some teams lean more into the transfer portal because those are known commodities. I know this guy can play. I know that he can come in here and contribute and maybe fill a need. And that's where Michigan and USC have done really well, in particular over the last 2 years. These 2 classes that they each signed out of the transfer portal were really good. So I want to be fair to each of these teams, programs, coaches, all of it, recruiting departments. Was I surprised with where their high school recruiting rankings were? Yes. I thought that they were going to have more momentum. Does more go into it now than what did 2 and 3 and 4 years ago? Absolutely. Because the NIL conversation has changed dramatically. And quite frankly, we just don't know what the conversations are like between the coaches, the athletic department, all of these people, and these recruits. Because I know that there are recruits out there that walk in and they're like, yeah, nice to meet you. Okay, let's get down to business. Some coaches are turned off by that. I mean, it's impacting these recruiting rankings. There's no doubt. So Michigan and USC did a really good job in the transfer portal. When you look at the average player rating out of the transfer portal, these 2 teams, at least in the sites that I was on, they finished 3rd and 4th respectively in the country. USC's average player rating out of the transfer portal, 90.6. Michigan's 90.57. So they're getting themselves better. USC, 6 players on defense from the transfer portal. Michigan got good linebacker help, edge help, offensive line help, in particular on the inside where they were going to miss some guys after graduation. So these are the areas that they need help, and they're getting that through the transfer portal. Okay, so those were my surprises, maybe in the negative direction. How about pleasant surprises in the positive direction? Let me start with Penn State. Now, to be fair, Penn State didn't blow it out of the water with a top 10 class or a top 5 class or beat Ohio State in recruiting, but they did do something, and they've continued a trend now for 2 straight years that was really lacking for them in the 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They've started to own their own state. And I think that's really imperative for any program. Even if you're not going to have great players from your state, you got to get the best players from your state. In particular in the era of the transfer portal, because generally speaking, those guys that are more local, they're not going to be the ones that are going to be heading out the door right away to go back home or to, be mercenaries. So they can be cores to your team. Even if they're not the best players on your team, they can be the core to your team, the nucleus of your team. And Penn State has done a much better job over the last couple of years, and certainly this year, retaining the best players in their state. You look at Penn State in 2023, they got 3 of the top 4 out of their state, 6 of the top 10, only 1 top 100 player in the state, but they got him. Last year, they got 3 of the top 4, 6 of the top 10, including Nick Singleton, Abdul Carter. Like, these were main contributors this last year for Penn State. And it turned the tide, because they were struggling in this regard in 2021 and 2020. You look back at 2021, they didn't get any of the top 5 players in the state. All 5 were top 100 players, including Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison. In 2020, there was only 1 player in the top 100 in the country from Pennsylvania, and they lost him that year. They lost the top player in the state each of those years, 2021 and 2020, to Ohio State in their own conference. So they've fixed that. They've gotten the top player in the state to back-to-back years, and they've started to own their state. So I thought that was a positive from Penn State's perspective. Another pleasant surprise, Oklahoma. I thought Oklahoma had a really great class, and obviously the rankings suggest that. As far as the total class in terms of recruits and transfers, number 6, their best since 2021 when Caleb Williams came in. They had the number 4 class in the country when it just looks at high school recruits. That's their best high school class since 2005. So, Brent Venables did a great job. I looked back at some of these classes that they had high school only over the last few years, and Lincoln Riley wasn't touching that. 2019, I believe they had the 6th best class in the country. They had an 8 in there, but then 10, 13, 9, 19 in 2016. So Brent Venables has done a really good job. Their first class is the best they've had in a long time. 6 of their best 7 recruits are either defensive players or offensive linemen. How do you get good? How do you win going into the SEC? You better play good defense. You better play good on the line of scrimmage. And their best player overall is their quarterback that they got, Jackson Arnold. So I loved what Oklahoma did. A couple of others that I thought were good momentum, pleasant surprises. TCU. TCU signed a heck of a class. They've also done well in the transfer portal. 22nd overall class, and this is one of those teams that capitalizes. They had slipped a little bit in recruiting, and then they come back after this great year that they had. I had them as high school classes in 2022 as 45th, 2021 is 54th, 2020 was 23rd, 2019 was 32nd. So they jump up there and they recruited at a high level, capitalizing on the momentum of that great year there for Sonny Dykes. Another one for me was Texas Tech. I thought Joey McGuire did a heck of a job. Their class was, right up there, top 25 class, 4th in the Big 12. Joey McGuire is working it, and he's doing a great job. I like Joey McGuire a lot. I was hard on the program and the administration for firing Matt Wells when they did. I don't care if you fire Matt Wells. You can fire Matt Wells. They fired him when the team had 5 wins and some winnable games down the stretch, and they fired him, and it's wait, that didn't sit right with me from a student athlete's perspective. From if I'm playing there, that sours me a little bit, but they hired a great coach. I really love what Joey McGuire is doing. I loved covering them when they played TCU. And when I looked back, they were 4th in the Big 12 in recruiting. They hadn't finished higher than 7th, going back 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And when you're finishing 4th, remember, or caveat, when you're finishing 4th in the Big 12 now, that means that when Texas and Oklahoma leave, you're finishing 2nd in the Big 12. So right now they're recruiting on par with a TCU, who is owning recruiting outside of Texas and Oklahoma. So when they move, like, those are the teams that are going to be the class of the Big 12. You're looking at Texas Tech. You're looking at TCU. And I think that that's really positive. And then the last team that was surprising to me, at least, Colorado. And I know that we shouldn't be surprised because of what Deion is and what he's doing. But this was a 1-11 team. 1-11 team that just pulled in a top 30 recruiting class. That's pretty special. That is a quick turnaround. And in particular, this wasn't like a team that had been having a lot of success, then went to 1-11, and now has bounced back. Like, Colorado has not been relevant very much for 2 decades. 1 year in which they won a division, went and played for a Pac-12 title. That's it. And so for Deion to do what he's doing is pretty amazing. This guy can get in any living room in the country, and he pulls in a 5-star transfer. He pulls in a 5-star high school recruit, and that's pretty special. That's pretty special.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here. College football on Fox.